You are live.
Good evening. I'm calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, April 19th, 2021 to order. We are conducting our meeting remotely in compliance with the special Open Public Meeting Act rules issued by Governor Inslee's emergency order. City Clerk, can you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Figueroa.
Councilmember Figueroa present.
Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel, present.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey, present.
Councilmember Fleming.
Councilmember Fleming here.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington here.
And Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before we begin our meeting, we have a few special rules I want to go over with everyone. First is the participation in public comments. Written comments will continue to be accepted via email. Comments received by 5:30 p.m. deadline have been electronically provided to the City Council for their consideration. Subject to technological limitations, the Council will also accept telephonic comments, and members of the public can call the number listed on the agenda, 1-509-342-7253, conference ID 508-549-900#. For those calling in, please be advised that calls are taken in the order that they are received. Secondly, for council members, as with our previous meetings, we use the red robin during our public public hearings, etc. However, tonight we have only our study session, and I will use the raise hand option during study session to help expedite our conversation flow. With that, may I ask Mayor Pro Tem or Council Member Pro Tem Lee to lead us in Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council Member Pro Tem Lee. At this time, I would like to call for a motion to either accept or amend the agenda as proposed.
Mayor Belisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move approval of the agenda as distributed.
We have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay. Are there any objections to the motion as presented? Council Member Pro Tem Lee, you have your hands raised.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if it's worthy of a correction, but I did notice in the under the city manager and council comments reports that you and I were to have scheduled a PCRC council member meeting with council member Mello, and I don't recall that being that way. I believe, as I recall, it was the pro tem was the other pro tem and younger pro tem C. Worthington that was identified. Anyway, I don't know how that's handled.
Okay, I believe that is under the consent agenda where the meetings appear, so we will make note of that at the time, and I will make the motion to approve with that amendment or that change in the meeting minutes. Thank you very much, Council Member Pro Tem Lee. Okay, do I have any objections to the agenda as submitted? Okay, hearing none, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. Thank you very much. This evening, we have two presentations, both of which are continuations of our previous homeless discussion that we had, I believe, a couple of meetings ago. And two of the items that were brought up was one by our police chief and the officers' interactions and referrals to the Greater Lake Mental Health Care PATH team. when they had individuals that they encountered that were in need of services. So this evening we do have individuals from Greater Lakes Mental Health, and they're here to present to us to give us an idea of what the PATH team is and how it can be of use to our citizens, as well as potentially to address some of our concerns and issues regarding homeless. This evening we have Trisha Munson from Greater Lakes Mental Health here to provide a PowerPoint presentation and give us that overview. Trisha, can you turn your camera on and your mic, and we look forward to your presentation.
Hi. Forgive my casualness. It was a very long day in the outreach world, so I am home. It was warm outside. It was not warm in the woods, so I'm trying to warm up and get my bearings again. But so I'm from Greater Lakes Mental Health team. I am part of the PATH team. Are you ready for the presentation now? Yep. Okay. I don't know if they have my PowerPoint ready. Aha, you're amazing. So PATH stands for Project Assistance Transition to Homelessness. If we can go to the next slide. So a couple of the things that we do street outreach. We work in all of unincorporated Pierce County, and then we also do some of the Tacoma side, but generally speaking, we don't canvass in unincorporated or in the city of Tacoma city limits. There's a separate outreach team for that. We are often called to that area though, and so if we're called by a concerned citizen, a community member, a business owner, law enforcement, we will respond. But we go out into the streets, we go out into the woods, we look for places that are gathering trash, we look for well-worn trails, we look for cuts and fence lines. In the wintertime, we look for smoke above tree lines that indicate someone's having a fire in areas that are not meant for human habitation. Specific to University Place, we are very alert and looking for people living in their cars. And to be really honest, most of University Place has more of what we see people living in their cars than actually living outside in comparison to other parts of the county. I did try really hard to get some actual statistics on that. Unfortunately, the county didn't have the data available that I had requested. So I can give you what we see, but we also look for suspicious areas. Sometimes if you see scrap wood being put together, tarps, things like that, we will go and encounter people. And then we also work with some of the shelters, Pierce County Jail, and then recovery centers, which are places that people are taken involuntary, usually by law enforcement or admitted from a hospital, who need mental health stabilization. But upon that stabilization, if they are homeless, they just get released back to the street. And from there, generally the follow through on medication, being compliant with what they need to do mental health wise or going to treatment generally doesn't happen if they're released back to the street. So we have very good relationships with these places that people are detained, and they can call us so that, like I said, upon their release, we have a plan in place instead of releasing them back to the street. So we can go to the next slide. Some of the people that we work really closely with is the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. They have a community liaison unit that we work with frequently. I would say we probably talk with them at least 4 days a week, if not more, and we go out with them at least 3 days a week. When they encounter somebody who's experiencing homelessness, they will call us and ask if we're available to come out now, or they can arrange a meeting for us, or they just make us alert of places. Sometimes they'll tell us, hey, we haven't been back there yet, but we're noticing this. Can you guys check it out? That gives us an opportunity to go offer some services and resources before they're actually asked to leave or before it becomes a criminal issue. You know, if somebody is struggling with mental health issues, and sometimes even in cases of addiction, going to jail isn't helpful for them. They just rack up more fines. We're paying for them to be in jail. And there's really nothing being accomplished other than the fact that they warm up and get a few meals, but then they get released right back to the street. So for us, it's a lot easier for law enforcement to contact us ahead of time or to go with them. We have connected with Deputy Brand, who is the community officer or deputy in University Place as well. And we have been out to Kaibioshi Park, I know I'm going to say that wrong, and Homestead Park. More of our target areas lately have been around your library and police department area, as well as kind of down by where the old Albertsons, I believe it's a Dollar Tree now, and then in the parking lot across from that at nighttime, we see a lot of people that are sleeping in their cars. And when I say a lot, it's a handful. It's not anything compared to the rest of the county. However, if we don't target those areas, they'll continue to grow. Public Works and Code Enforcement, we work closely with them as well. Again, mostly in Pierce County. We are available to all of the cities to contact us, though. So when somebody's home is not meeting standards for habitation, meant for human habitation, this means if there's too much trash or a rodent issue, if they don't have up-to-date utilities, like no running water, no sewer, things like that, they can contact us and we can help find solutions for those problems so that their place can meet habitation standards so they don't end up homeless. Sometimes that's not possible, and then we end up having to help find a different place for them to go live. That relationship for us is really important. In the past, code enforcement will call us on the day they're boarding up a house and say, we're boarding this house up. We have 3 people in the driveway that now have no place to go. And so we started reaching out and saying, hey, as soon as you guys start getting these complaints, as soon as you guys start noticing these issues, please call us then. We have a lot more time and a lot more available to us if we are able to have a heads up on a place instead of they're waiting in the driveway with their suitcases. So I have a story I am going to tell towards the end of this presentation about it, but we've had some really great success in those relationships, and those are relationships we'd really like to cultivate. So we can go to the next slide. Here's some of our outreach photos, just so everyone knows, anybody that's in these photos that is not an employee has had the opportunity to sign a piece of paper that says it's okay if any identifying information is shown. So the first thing I wanted to point out is collaboration. The picture right here is myself, some members of the Tacoma Rescue Mission Search and Rescue Outreach Team, and then the tall skinny guy at the end who looks like House. His name is Elliot Bagwell, and he's actually a nurse practitioner from CMAR who does outreach with us. One of the best things for us is to have somebody on site that can treat wounds, illnesses, things like that from a medical standpoint. And our goal there is to reduce emergency room visits, reduce drug seeking activity, things like that. One of the best examples I can give you, well, 2 of them, is when we encounter someone who believes they might be pregnant, but they don't have insurance, or they are, haven't showered in 4 weeks, or they are too scared to go to a clinic. That is something we can do on site. We can also treat simple illnesses or STDs, which for those not aware, STDs run rampant in homeless encampments, specifically syphilis in Pierce County right now. And that requires 4 different shots of antibiotics. They can all be given at once, but the only way to treat it is by that. And most of the people that we see in the encampments aren't going to come back. So we are able to bring out those shots, and he does them on site. He can do pregnancy tests. He can lance abscesses, treat wounds. He does not prescribe pain meds. He does not prescribe anything scheduled. He can look at something and give a medical professional opinion to someone of whether they should be seen or to go to urgent care. And our relationship with that team has been phenomenal. We have done a lot of really good work. And then the outreach team from Tacoma Rescue Mission. It's important that we collaborate because we all have different resources. Greater Lakes does not have a shelter, the Rescue Mission does. So when we're out together, we can offer some services that they don't offer, and they have services such as shelter that we don't. The second picture you see there is my partner, who usually would be on the call. Unfortunately, she's not able to be tonight, but she's got the purple clipboard in her hand. And then Jetta, who's a mental health therapist, and she's across the parking lot with her hand up. And that's Elliot crouched down talking to someone. But once we establish relationships in the community, we generally have people that do want help, and it is terrifying to get help. With the pandemic, it's been even more hard. People don't realize the challenges that we face in trying to get help for people. So they know where we're going to be and when we're going to be there. And one of the things that we do pride ourselves in is our follow-up. And so they show up. And this specific picture I'm using because we were supposed to meet one person that day. And that person told everyone else in the camp, hey, they're bringing help today. And we had 13 people show up for help that day. So that's pretty significant. We do try usually to stay in areas that are not places that people have been trespassed from, or to not draw attention, but sometimes that's the only option we have. And at that point, we go into the businesses with our business card and show them what we're doing and let them know that we're not, this isn't going to be a frequent meeting place, or if you ever have problems, please call us, we'll come out, that sort of thing. And then we have rural camps, which are very hard to find sometimes. This picture you're seeing on the end there, that was actually like a box spring. And the only way to get over to this camp was to have the ability to have the wire sent back over so you could get on that thing and go across it. We have canvassed in this specific area many times. This is actually in Fife, and we've seen maybe 1 or 2 people. We didn't know about this. We found this one day coming through there. When we got over to the other side, there was more than 30 people at that camp, and there was also a 10-month-old baby at that camp. And those people had been homeless in that area for 3 years, and they did not exist anywhere in our homeless databases. They had never been touched by the system. So it's important that we do the outreach we do because of those situations. Because if there's 30 people at that one camp, think of all the camps that we're not seeing, all the abandoned houses, the sheds, the shipping containers, things like that. So next slide. So in addition to outreach and just finding people, I would like to say up front 2 things we don't do is we do not hand out tents and sleeping bags. While we do agree that humans have the right to be warm and safe at night, we also don't encourage people to continue living this lifestyle. Also, tents and sleeping bags are extremely expensive, and oftentimes when we go to camps that have been abandoned, those are the things that are left behind, are the tents and the sleeping bags. They're also high value items in the homeless community that they will oftentimes use as trade for sex and drugs, things like that. So we try to not contribute to that. We do carry emergency blankets with us, the foil looking emergency blankets, and we do always have an opportunity to give somebody warm clothing, whether we have it or not. We get it for them, so that we try to make sure that people are having their basic needs met. We also hand out hygiene items. We give out a lot of shoes. Oftentimes that's the barrier for someone being able to go inside someplace. Showers, there's now what's called the MRRT in unincorporated Pierce County. It's a RV unit that is run through a program in Puyallup, and they have 2 trailers that come along with it. One of them has showers and one has 4 washer and dryers in it. And we have specific churches that we go to certain days of the week. And when we go to those churches, we provide a hot lunch, a sack lunch to take. We have employment specialists. We have the medical provider. We have housing case management, so my team. We have mental health counselors, and an opportunity for people to sit down and get the things they need. And even if they no-show appointments with us at other times, they always know where that RV is and they know where we're going to be. So they do eventually, most people will show back up so that we can get them back into what they need, whether that's getting an ID, getting them signed up for health benefits, finding, we have an awesome employment specialist that works for Vallejo, transportation issues. Pre-COVID, we could transport to a lot of things, including doctor's appointments and job interviews. Right now, we're not able to, so we pass out bus tickets. We also do provide bus tickets for people to get to the RV. We do substance use assessments there as well. We have a substance use assessor that comes with us. And so we find all of these things necessary, and we wait. Let somebody have a shower. Let them get some hot food in their belly. Let them feel a little bit more human and a little bit better about themselves. And usually our conversations go a lot better. One specific incident I can give you, there's a gal who is in her mid-50s, been a housewife most of her life, and raised her kids at the end of them leaving the home at 19 and 20 years old. Her and her husband split up, and it didn't go well for her, and she ended up sleeping in her car. And that also meant she wasn't showering, and she was too embarrassed to talk to the rest of her family about it. And we came across her on a referral from the sheriff's department, told her about the RV. She came to the RV. We were able to find her someplace safe to park at night. And she was sleeping in her car, but because she was able to get a shower and some of her basic needs met, we were able to get her into some place. It's temporary, but it's not outside. She's just started working. So in about 2 months from now, she'll have enough that she can start paying her way for rent and things like that. But she wouldn't have ever, she told me today, I actually saw her today, she wouldn't have ever been okay with even exploring those options if she didn't have the opportunity to feel like she was clean and not so distracted by being hungry. So there is a lot of good that comes from these type of programs. So we can go to the next slide. So I apologize for 2 missing pictures. I actually have to get updated releases, but the first one is Carol. She's a 72-year-old woman. She was living alone in Puyallup in a mobile home. She had owned the mobile home for over 20 years, but was renting space. We got a call from Pierce County Code Enforcement, and they said that they were going to have to board her place up because she hadn't had running water for 6 months. When we contacted her, she referred me to the mobile home, like the park manager, and I talked to him, and he was a little bit surly with me and told me that her water pipe had busted, and so they just turned her water off. And I said, well, who's there with her? And he said, no one, she lives alone. So I went and talked to her. It took her a little bit to let me in the house. And when I got into her house, it looked like my grandma's house on the inside. She wasn't a hoarder. It was so clean. It had old lady couches. I mean, it was just your typical like grandma's house. And she said, I just don't know what happened. I'm the only one left in my family. She had worked at Catholic Community Services for almost 20 years as a caregiver, and she was living off of $680 a month, which isn't a lot. So I called my boss, who's a gentleman who reminds me a lot of my dad, and I just said, hey, would you come look at this with me? So he and I crawled under her mobile home, and there was no broken pipe. So we went into the mobile home, and it turns out her hot water heater, the overflow valve had busted, and so there was water rushing out of it as it emptied. Well, no one looked into it. No one gave her a chance to look into it. No one helped. And now here we are. They're going to evict a 72-year-old woman onto the street who owns this mobile home. Within a week, we were able to get a hot water heater donated. We got the labor donated. We went and had all of this done for her, had her water turned back on, at which point I reached out to some of our other resources. And in Pierce County, their Human Services Department has a lot of departments that I didn't even know existed. And I've worked in this industry for about 14 years. She is considered low income. So we were able to get some roof work done for her. We got all of the floors that had been saturated replaced. We got her doors replaced and her porch fixed. And it didn't cost her anything. These are programs that already exist. And she was able to keep her home. That was almost 2 years ago now. She was able to keep her home. And not only that, we were able to take her to Social Security and to get a review done on her. And it increased her income by almost $400 a month. So that is a significant success that had code enforcement just boarded her house up and sent her away, it wouldn't have ended that way. So the middle picture is our friend Steve. He's now 60, but at the time of this photo, he had been living for 8 years in the woods behind a Rite Aid in Puyallup off of Canyon Road. And he had been working at the same job for about 22 years. He went to his work one day and they had closed the doors and there was no money left, nothing. He went to live with his parents. He ended up losing his home, went to live with his parents, ended up falling back into his old habits of alcoholism. And the police called us about him and said, hey, we feel like he would respond well to you. And Steve had been helped by other agencies in the community, and just the follow through wasn't there for him. He probably also wasn't ready a lot of the time as well. But either way, we were able to go make a relationship with him, at which time he decided he was going to go to drug and alcohol treatment for the drinking. And on the day of his graduation, he had been very supported by his by the law enforcement that brought us to him. On the day of his treatment, all 5 of the deputies that work on that department showed up, and we talked to the treatment facility, and they said, you know, we've never had the police come for a graduation. We'd like it. And I've never seen so many grown people cry at the same time in my life. A lot of these people who had been court ordered to be there, or who were struggling with their addiction and their past and things they had done, they just felt so supported, and they saw a whole new light for law enforcement with the fact that they showed up. And they they've continued to support Steve. He ended up getting a job, and he's working locally here in the community still. And on his first day of work, some of the deputies pitched in and bought him a new lunchbox and wrote some kind messages inside, and they do check on him from time to time. And so he's somebody that we took a chance with. I knocked on a door out of a Craigslist ad and just said, hey, this is the situation. And the gentleman who owned the home said, no way. And then he called me about 20 minutes later and said, you know, I feel like I need to at least meet him. And so we took him to meet this guy, and he said, I really like him. I want to give him a chance, and maybe I'll get burned. I don't know. And I said, listen, you know, we'll support through this process. And he's lived there for 2 years now. So they're best friends. It's kind of the best thing that could have happened, but it's definitely been a success. And then Brad is our last one. He is actually up in the Milton area, and he's been living on property that many, many years ago was his family's property. It's undeveloped. He's suffering from significant mental illness. And when we met Brad, he had not showered in 4 years. He had some significant skin deficits. His hair was matted to his head. He had pretty much canned foods that he could get at the local mini mart he could walk to. And he just needed a little help. He needed some guidance. He needed someone to help with his situation. He's somebody that we're still currently working with. He's not moved from the property, but he's not there illegally either. He has permission from the investment company that owns the property to be there until they start breaking ground. He keeps it clean. He takes a lot of pride in it, but it's taken us this long for us to develop and establish a relationship that he trusts us now, that we can take him for showers. And we do have a living situation lined up for him, and he's finally able to see that we're there for good reasons and that it's safe and that he can trust us. And a lot of times with significant mental illness, Brad is also somebody he was raised in the military, and he's lived overseas, and he just has a lot of worry and a lot of paranoia due to his mental illness. And so it's been a long time for him, but we finally are in a space now that he's excited to live inside. We also, when we met him, I wish I could have shared the picture. He had these square glasses frames, and electrical taped were these round, thick as old soda bottle lenses into these square glasses frames. And we were actually able to use some of the funding money that came in from donations and take Brad to get an eye exam and new glasses. He had not had an eye exam for almost 20 years. So we were able to do that, and for him to be able to have his vision restored was a huge thing for him. So we can go to the next slide. So as the slide states, there's really no true successful way to measure the homelessness in our county. We do what's called the point in time count every year, and my agency participates in that. And it's a 24-hour period that most agencies in the county, some providers, some volunteers, we all go out to every place of known homelessness, and we just tally people. It's not a conversation of, do you want help? It's not, we literally work from midnight one night till 11:59 the next night in teams, and we bring food to encourage people to talk to us. And with that, I don't have the handout since we're virtual, and I apologize for that, but they report roughly around 18 to 1900 now homeless in Pierce County. And just my team alone, we encounter at least 30 people a week that are in no database, that don't exist in these counts. So if you look at the actual numbers, it's much higher, and people don't realize how high that number is. We actually are also seeing a huge increase in veterans that are homeless. And I want to take an opportunity to let people know that when we ask people if they have veteran status, it's considered different when it comes to housing. So now we ask them if they have ever served 1 day active duty. So even if somebody doesn't have 20 years retired and is a decorated veteran, if they've ever served in the military, I have yet to have anybody that has not qualified for some sort of services. And there are huge programs, especially with housing right now, that people have been referred to and housed. I think we've probably housed at least maybe 6 or 8 people since the first of this year into veteran housing for people who have served in our military. And it's a pretty quick and easy process, as long as you have somebody to walk through it with you and somebody who's got a telephone or access to a computer. So we can go to the next slide. Some of the challenges we face is lack of affordable housing. And to be honest with you, I have family that's law enforcement and other family that works in government agencies. And I was, prior to my position, I've always thought that that's been a cop-out excuse, that there's no affordable housing. Until I was in this position when they built a low-income housing apartment complex. And in this complex, I believe there's 10 or so buildings. There's hundreds of apartments, and they're all low income, but they also are dedicating 8 units in each building to just HUD or HIN vouchers, which are housing vouchers for low income people or people with disabilities. And before the first apartment building was even finished being built, the entire complex was sold out, and they have had a waiting list that's years long since then. So if there's that many people to fill up a place like that, and that's in like Spanaway area, Spanaway Graham area, there is definitely a need for affordable housing. The other thing with affordable housing is that we have so many people on Social Security income that ranges about $780 a month. Most places, even to rent a room, want you to make 3 times the rent. So if you look for a really cheap room, let's say $500, you have to make at least $1,500 to rent that room. And that's what, for a lot of people, keeps them unhoused. So some of those standards, we work with private landlords. We also go into some agencies and say, hey, you know, we're willing to help out with first, last, and deposit. Here's the situation. You know, can we try 6 months and see if this would work? Lack of funding for services. My program is, it's a contract program through the county or through the HCA, I'm sorry. And so we are recontracted every year. But to use money on things like moving expenses, glasses, transportation, we have to apply for grants. We rely on donations, things like that for us to be able to make those programs work. Substance use services, it's a huge issue in Pierce County. Pierce County has one detox facility. It holds 14 people. On average, I contact about 120 people a week, and I would say 80% of them are struggling with substance use. So one detox facility that has 14 beds available isn't a lot, and it is required to go to detox first if you are using opiates or alcohol before you can go into inpatient treatment. So if somebody comes to me today and says, I have a heroin problem and I really want to get clean, I need some help, the soonest I usually can get them in for help is 3 to 4 weeks out, but with the pandemic, it's gone to like 5 or 6 weeks. We also have one substance use assessor for the entire county and the city of Tacoma that will come into the camps with us and do these assessments. We have one. But then he has to go back to his office and he has to do the referral, get the authorization in place, get a bed day. That's sometimes can take several days. You're waiting for calls back from people. If people don't have insurance, we have to get them enrolled, and trying to find people again after that can be difficult. People living homeless move often, and so that's been a huge issue for us as well. We get a lot of vigilantes in the community. My partner and I were in Bonnie Lake one time helping speak to a homeless person who the gentleman had a master's degree and had worked for DSHS for 12 years. He has a higher level of education than I do. And we had somebody who was very mad that we were out there talking to the tweakers, as he told me. He got out and got in my face and yelled at me, and then proceeded to get in his car and intentionally attempted to run us over and was yelling at us the whole time to stop helping the tweakers. So for us, you know, we're not out there enabling people. We are definitely an accountability-based program, but things like that don't help. Our demographic area to cover is huge. We have the entire county without the city of Tacoma, and my team is 2 people. So for us, that's hard. Grave disability in Washington State is extremely liberal. People just have to be able to pretty much tell you where they can get food, where they can go to the bathroom, and that they're not going to hurt themselves or someone else. We've had people that have been undetainable for multiple attempts. We had one lady who was in her 60s. She could answer their questions perfect every time. And then the last time she defecated right next to the crisis responder that was doing her assessment. And when they got her to the hospital for clearance, she had body fleas and lice. They had to shave her whole body. She had so much money, over $1,000 in food stamps on her card. And she was receiving Social Security. She had thousands of dollars in there to the point that it had been shut off. she couldn't use any of it. She didn't know how, she didn't know it was there. She was in such bad shape. And unfortunately, with the view of what's considered gravely disabled and taking people's rights away, oftentimes it is too liberal, and we're not able to provide hope for people sooner. And had we been able to provide hope sooner, it could have ended differently for her. And then lack of transitional housing. So when people do decide they want to go to treatment, when they get discharged, they generally get discharged back to the street unless we reach out and work with these treatment centers, which are usually out of county, to find some resource for them to come back to from treatment so that we don't put them back in the street. And then access to mental health services. With the pandemic, it's been extremely hard. A lot of mental health services are virtual, and most of the demographic of people we work with do not have laptops, tablets, or phones to have a virtual phone call with the mental health provider. So that's been rough.
Ms. Munson, we're kind of getting low on our time here. Are you almost finished with your presentation?
Yep, we can go right to the next slide.
Okay. That was it.
Yep, I think that's it. So.
Well, I want to thank you for your extremely thorough presentation. It's given us a good understanding of the services that you offer to our community. And I know that we will probably be having some further discussion amongst council as to how we can utilize those services better to address our homeless situation here in University Place. So thank you so much for attending our meeting this evening.
Absolutely.
Okay. Our next presentation is West Pierce Fire and Rescue. We have Fire Chief Jim Sharp that's going to give us an overview of their Squad 21 unit that we heard about at our last homeless meeting and had received a presentation on in the past from the West Pierce Fire District. But we're interested in finding out more about the Squad 21 since it is up and running in in Lakewood, and see what the prospects are of getting a similar unit to our taxpayers here in University Place. So with that, Chief Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Appreciate you having me back. I realized the last time we talked was actually leading up to our election, which was, right, way back in the fall of 2019, which seems like forever ago with a year and a pandemic. So I have a short presentation I'll go through, and actually going to talk about a few things, not just our Squad 21, but a few different programs and things that we've been able to implement since the election. So if I could get my slide program up, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. We'll go ahead and jump right into the first slide. So as I said last time I saw, it was just before the election for our renewal of our operations levy, and we were successful in renewing a 4-year operations levy, and there were some key things that included in the funding package. And there was authorization to provide for 15 additional firefighters to augment some upgrades to our EMS programs, and also a connected care position, which I think is one that was very interesting to most of you on the council at the time, and kind of relates directly to some of the stuff we were just talking about here in the prior presentation. So we had scheduled to hire 5 firefighters in 2020, along with the connected care position. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and I'll speak to that a little bit more here in a minute. And then next year, we're scheduled to hire the additional 10. So that'll get us to 15 firefighters. So we broke it up over a couple of different hirings, not all in one year. We'll go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So I'll talk about our fire response first. In January 2020, we implemented a pilot program for what we called at the time a sprint car. And what the sprint car, imagine a small vehicle such as an SUV or a pickup truck that carries 2 people, and it was intended to replace our fire engines on minor calls. We have, for example, someone calls 911, they've got a carbon monoxide detector that's going off and they can't figure out what the problem is, they don't know, or they've got a smoke detector that continues to beep and they can't get it to stop. We would roll out a big fire engine and send 3 people on a fire engine across town to go see them and help them out and fix the problem. Didn't really seem like the best resource to do that kind of thing, especially when you talk about our largest piece of apparatus, which gets about 2 miles to the gallon. So We implemented a sprint car to replace our fire engines on those types of calls. The firefighters carry all their personal protective equipment for firefighting, but it doesn't have any ladders or hose or any of those things that we normally associate with the fire engine. So they can show up at a fire scene, they can be integrated, they have all their equipment with them, but they're not set up to go on fire calls. They're strictly intended to be for more low-level calls that would replace the fire engine in that way. This one almost overnight proved to be extremely beneficial. We saw a lot of positive results from this. So we'll move on to the second slide. I guess. After running the pilot program for a year, in January of 2021, we ended the pilot program and implemented what's now called our Squad 21. It was changed from a sprint car to a squad, and that's really just has to do with dispatch. It's just a naming convention that sprint wasn't going to work, so it's called a squad. But this picture captures a pretty good look at what the comparisons would be. Right now, starting the pilot program, we used an older expedition that we had in service, but the new vehicle that will replace it is going to be just what you see there, a crew cab pickup truck. And when you compare that in size to a large fire engine, there's quite a bit of difference there. A much more appropriate vehicle to send out on low acuity calls that don't have a lot of high risk or danger or fire or anything like that. So what we essentially are doing is replacing a $1.2 million vehicle with a vehicle that costs about $80,000 when it's fully equipped and outfitted. A lot more efficient on the vehicle, but more importantly, a lot more efficient with the staffing that we're sending out. Rather than just put another fire engine out there and staff it 24 hours a day with 3 people, we're addressing this call increase with a 12-hour car that only runs from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and it has 2 people on it. So it reduces the overall labor cost by about 65% over putting a fire engine on 24 hours a day. So we saw it as the right type of vehicle at the right time of day, providing the right level of staffing to address what was becoming a pretty large number of our calls, these low acuity, non-high risk fire type calls. So instead of sending out a large fire apparatus, we're sending out something much more appropriate. And we'll go to the next slide. And then on the other side of our operations is our EMS services. And we also had a pilot program with our EMS services as well that we started in July of 2019, and that was a basic life support transport vehicle. Up to this point, all of our medic units were designed to be ALS transport vehicles. They had 2 paramedics and designed to transport critically ill patients. But we were seeing a major shift, as I discussed in our last meeting, in the type of calls we're getting. A lot of people were starting to rely on the fire service for non-emergent care and kind of routine care. So they were calling 911 instead of calling their local doctor. And what that created for us was we were taking our ALS transport units and our paramedics, which were kind of a limited resource, out of service to treat and transport minor injuries. So the concept was to create a basic life support vehicle staffed with 2 firefighter EMTs designed to transport and take over all of our low acuity calls in order to try and keep more ALS resources available for the critical calls. We changed this program multiple times throughout the pilot program. It ran for quite some time, and we just couldn't quite get it to work right. There were some outcomes that we just didn't reach that we thought we were initially when we first projected some of our outcomes. And we just ran into problems that we couldn't seem to get around. One example would be if a call gets over dispatched, and so now we've sent an ALS unit with 2 paramedics to the scene, and we find out that it's a minor injury. The person has a sprained ankle or something like that. There's 2 solutions there, and either one of them is great. One is we go ahead and just transport the patient since we're there, but that takes an ALS resource out of service for a significant amount of time to take a BLS patient down to the hospital. The other option is to call the BLS transport unit, and now we end up with 2 transport units out of service while we're waiting for them to show up and make the patient transfer before we can release the ALS unit. In the meantime, the patient's waiting on and getting delayed service. So it just didn't seem to work right, but really what was the tipping point for us is when we started to run the numbers, we started the program with 4 ALS units in the district. And when we ran the numbers, we realized to support a tiered system like this with ALS and BLS designated cars, we were going to need to reduce our ALS cars down to 3 and put 2 BLS cars So we increased the total cars, but our ALS resources actually were going to reduce. And that was just something that didn't seem to fit right with us. And so we could never quite get this pilot program of a tiered system to work in a way that we thought was going to be correct for our community. We'll go to the next slide here. So what we ended up doing is we changed and completely shifted gears at the end of this pilot program. And instead of having a tiered system with ALS and BLS cars, we switched all of our cars to what we call hybrid transport units. And so they're all staffed now. Instead of 2 paramedics, they're all staffed with 1 paramedic, 1 firefighter, EMT. So any one of the 5 cars can handle an ALS call or a BLS call. And what that does for us, it provides 5 transport units now, which increases our transport capacity by 25%. It places a transport unit in all of our stations with the exception of 1, which is in Tillicum. And most importantly, rather than decreasing the number of our ALS unit, it actually expands that and it maintains our depth of resources for ALS transports. If we have a major incident and we have 4 critical patients, with tiered system, we can call for 4 units and have 4 ALS transport capable units to take those patients. Under the hybrid system, or under the hybrid system, we can do that. I'm sorry. Under the tiered system I described, we would only have 3 ALS units, so we could call for 3 ALS units for those critical patients, but we'd have to call for mutual aid for that 4th critical patient. So this gives us a lot of depth in our transport capabilities. It gives us a lot of diversity in our transport capabilities. And in the end, the dispatch issues are kind of non-existent. If they over-dispatch and we show up and it turns out they don't need ALS service, they just need BLS care, that's okay. And vice versa, if we show up to a BLS call and we dispatch just for a BLS call, but it turns into a critical patient, we can change the narrative on that as well and be ready to take the patient immediately under ALS care. So we've put Medic 24 in service. Medic 24 is located in our Oak Brook station, which was kind of a bit of a hole for us. Oak Brook would draw services out of our Station 22 in Lake City, or it would draw services out of UP. So it was kind of pulling and tugging and pulling in 2 different ways. So now having that ALS service in Oak Brook area is really kind of fleshed out and covered our whole area much better. And we don't have our medic units going out of position nearly as much. We'll go to the next slide. So those are 2 things that we've already implemented. We've implemented Squad 21 and we've also implemented Medic 24, but we're not finished yet. We've still got some more work to do in our 4-year plan with our levy that we've passed. We'll go to the next slide here. One of the programs is our connected care position. And I know this was something we talked quite a bit about at the last meeting, and I know Councilmember McCluskey was very interested in this one and had quite a few questions that we talked about. This is one we were really excited about, and CARE is an acronym for Community Access, Referral, and Education. And a lot of what was touched on in the previous presentation, we were seeing people calling 911 for a lot of things that we couldn't treat, nor ER could treat very well. That wasn't what they were for. Substance abuse disorders, homelessness, people that were in mental health crisis, and those kinds of things. We'd call 911, but all we could do was take them to the hospital, they'd get released, and the next day they'd be back in crisis again and calling us again. It was creating a cycle of events where they were calling over and over and over, and they weren't really getting to the true care that they needed. And the goal was to create a position in our organization where we could refer those patients directly to a connected care representative, and they would help find the correct resource to really make a difference for them. There's a multitude of resources available in Pierce County. Most people, especially those with substance abuse disorders, homelessness, or have mental health issues, they don't know how to access those. They're not easily accessed by someone who's homeless and doesn't have maybe a phone, and they don't have access to the internet, and they may have other issues that challenge them. So having someone to help navigate that for them and get them off 911 and into the correct program is critical. So we were really excited about getting this program off the ground, but it was going to be a brand new program, and it was going to be a new employee and a new program stood up right in the middle of our EMS division. And along came a little thing called COVID last year that completely overwhelmed our medical services division, and implementing connected care was not something that we had the capacity to do last year. So our goal is to get that off the ground this year. Again, as I'm sure you're well aware, we're not out of the woods yet. There's still a lot happening with COVID. that's really putting a lot of our resource focus on. Although we're seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel, now we're kind of transitioning from COVID management to setting up community clinics and vaccination clinics and trying to help with the vaccination. So that's keeping us very busy, and all of our EMS folks are doing a lot of that right now too. So we still have really high hopes to get this off the ground, but it's probably something that's going to happen later in the year. So this one I think is really going to be a game changer for us to help navigate people from all these different social challenges that they're seeing and get them off 911 and getting them directly to some good services is going to help. And the next slide. And then the last thing that's part of our 4-year plan is to establish another 12-hour resource. Originally, when we were looking at a tiered system with ALS and BLS cars, since we were going to reduce to 3 ALS cars, we thought there might be a need for another 12-hour ALS car would be the solution to kind of backfill. Now with 5 hybrid cars, we're not so sure that a medic unit is going to be our biggest need, and that actually a squad might be much better utilized than a medic unit. So we're holding off kind of which way we go here, probably till the end of the year to make the final decision on this, whether it's going to be a squad or another 12-hour medic unit that gets put in service. And the last piece is establishing a 2nd battalion chief, and it says establishing, but really it's a reestablishment of a battalion chief. Prior to the Great Recession, we had 2 battalions in the fire department, a North and South battalion, 3 stations in each battalion managed by a separate battalion chief. During the recession, that 2nd battalion chief's position went away, and it's been vacated ever since. So this will reestablish that 2nd battalion chief and better utilize that position and a lot of the resources that they are utilized for establishing command and control on the scene. So next year, our plan is to implement both of these pieces of apparatus and personnel. About the July benchmark is what we've got targeted right now, so to give us time to get some of our new recruits out of recruit school and ready and up in staffing. So middle of July, and both of those will be located right here in University Place at Station 31. That's the intended plan. So we've made a few big strides and changes so far. We've got more on the way that'll be happening over the remainder of this 4-year levy, and we look to see these 2 new resources put on the road next year, and connected care as well. So a few things that have changed and a few things that are still on hold, but we're crossing our fingers that we can get through this pandemic and move forward on a few more things. I think that was my last slide. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on this. I think I see a couple of hands there. So
I want to thank you, Chief Sharp, for your presentation. Am I understanding that the Squad 21 we were referring to earlier is now referred to as the Connected Care Unit? Or
no, I think there was some confusion maybe about those 2 different resources coming out of our last meeting or during since the time has passed from our last meeting. Squad 21 is intended to be, I like to call it a fire engine without ladders and hose. It just goes on fire calls, low acuity fire calls. I think that the one that was really of interest to the council was the connected care position, because that was at the time when you were talking about the homelessness issues and how to start managing that, and we're having those conversations. And connected care is the piece. It's a single employee working in our EMS division, embedded in our EMS division, that our paramedics could refer clients to after they go on someone multiple times. They start to see something that maybe is not being served, and then that person can go out and do the direct outreach and work with them, get them into a program and get them some assistance. So connected care, I think, is the one that is really the one that the council was focused on, but I think somehow it got mixed up with what Squad 21 was intended to be.
Gotcha. And the idea is that both the Lakewood and the University Place community would each have their dedicated units.
A squad unit?
Yes.
It's looking that way. We're leaning towards that way, that squad 31 would be placed here. If it's not Squad 31, it would be another medic. It'd be a 2nd medic unit part-time here in Station 31, but there'd be another 12-hour resource placed here at Station 31. There's 1 medic unit now. There would either be another 12-hour medic unit or a squad. It's leaning more towards probably the squad since we changed our EMS response model.
Okay. All right, we are behind on our agenda, but I do see I have 2 council members with their hands up. If they have brief questions, I'll take them at this time. Councilmember McCluskey, and then followed by Kent Keel.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Sharp, for coming and clarifying a lot of questions that we had at our last meeting. Appreciate that. So I'm disappointed, but I understand the coordinated care didn't get off the ground because I saw a lot of value in that, and I think that value would have exponentiated and multiplied for the greater good to benefit that. Understand that you have a lot of moving parts and a lot of great ideas, and I really enjoy the presentation and getting the updates. I would like to have the updates continue maybe at a little more regular pace so that we can always grasp a handle on what's going on, what is the citizens' value for the fire in UP, and how that is evolving over time. And I certainly look forward to see the coordinated care up and running, and maybe hopefully, as we talked about in our meeting together, that a coordinated effort with some of the other parts such as PACE as well as our UP police. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, yes. And happy to come out and brief the council anytime.
Okay. Council Member Keel, followed by Council Member Fleming, and then we'll move on to our next item on the agenda.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Chief, thanks for your presentation. Just right off, I agree with Councilmember McCluskey that we would have, you come talk to us about a lot of your stuff more than just when it's election time. That'd be very helpful. So Medic 24 and Squad 21, those were pilots up until just recently, correct? And where were those pilots run? Were they all over the whole area, or were they just in a targeted area for the pilot?
They were, Medic 21 was housed. They were both housed where they are today. So Medic 21 was run out of Station 21, which are Stoughton Boulevard Station, and the Medic unit was out of our Oak Brook Station, and so that's where they were run. And so primarily the Medic unit, its primary zone was Oak Brook, but since it was a BLS car during the pilot program, it actually covered the entire district. So it was a special call resource that would come to anywhere in the entire district. So it was housed there, but it was a special call to the entire district.
So so they took calls all over the district, right? So
they did. The BLS car did, yes.
The
Squad 21 covered its primary response zone. And this was a little unique for us. It was different, where each of our fire stations has one response zone, and that's its primary response zone. Squad 21 actually had, because of the type of resource it was and the type of calls it ran, its primary response zone covered 2 station zones. So it covered our Station 21 and our Station 20 response zones, but it was also available as a resource anywhere in the district for fire calls. So it was running fire calls in the entire district, but it was running those low acuity calls in just 2 response zones.
Just in those areas only.
So the intent would be potentially is, if we can get a second one, that we could have one that covers an entire battalion and a second squad that covers the North Battalion. So you would split the district up between 2 squad units. They can cover more because they have a narrower focus type of calls that go on.
Right. So I guess the next time, and I know we're running short on time, but I would just say the next time we talk soon, hopefully, that we can have some more understanding around how now these pilots now going to roll out to the entire district. I'm feeling kind of out in the cold here a little bit for some of these things, and so I'm just really interested in the plan to spread that around to the whole district. Since we're all paying for the service, and so it would be great to have that. And also, since I know that our headquarters is actually here in University Place, so yeah, I just want to hear about the plan for how all these things will be rolled out to the entire district. That's the piece that I'm missing tonight.
Okay.
Thanks, Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Fleming, do you have a quick question or comment?
I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you. And Chief, thank you so much for your time tonight and in your presentation. As I shared with the council, I think it was a week ago or whenever we last met, I've had family members over in Lakewood who have been benefactors. I don't know whether it was Squad 21 or 24, but nonetheless, I've actually seen that in action firsthand and was very, very impressed with it. Always impressed with the firefighters and the work that they do. I think the elephant in the room that everyone's dancing around gingerly tonight, so I'm just going to go ahead and poke it. And that is, last year, the city participated as a partner in this program, in the pilot program. And so the question really before us is, if we had to go before the citizens tonight, or if you had to go before the citizens in University Place tonight and say, this is what the bang you got for your buck in last year's program, what would you say to those citizens from University Place? What did they get out of this?
Well, I think they got equally the same things that others have received, and which is one, most importantly, I think from the EMS perspective, which is the vast majority of our calls, being able to put that 5th medic unit on and create more depth in our resources. And I know, sometimes there's a perception, well, but it's not located in UP. But what happens, regardless of where it's located, there's an impact of drawdown, and when there's a hole somewhere, someone has to fill that hole. So by filling that and putting something there, it actually is bringing more consistency and reliability in UP. And I think it's important to understand we're not done yet. I mean, this is just kind of the first phase, and this was a multi-year plan to implement this stuff as part of our 4-year levy. And like I said, there are more resources that will be actually housed in the UP station next year as we get into the second part of this phase. But the initial phases were to put the 1st medic unit over there where we currently have a station without it, and then left a hole in our district. But moving into next year, there will be more resources, and they're actually going to go directly in the community. So it's sort of a shared answer, I guess. Part of it is by kind of the rising tide raises all ships, and by getting that additional resources on the street helps create a better balance of our service and reliability of our service. But then also moving into next year, which is kind of the second half of this implementation plan, there's going to be more direct services put right here in the station and in this community too, the 2nd Battalion and the 2nd resource of either an additional EMS unit or the squad. And again, I lean towards the squad because I believe that's probably where we're going to land, but that final decision hasn't been made yet. We want to put the right resource here that's going to make the best impact on the community.
Okay. I appreciate that, because I think what got the council's undivided attention is when it was shared with us that we had funded a program, but 100% of the benefit went to Lakewood. And we were asking the question, what are we doing here? So thank you for your response. I appreciate that. Yeah. And thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief Sharp, for giving us that thorough update. And we look forward to getting some additional updates here in the very near future. And as you launch your pilot program for connected care, maybe we can do another community presentation and presentation to council so we fully understand the benefits of that program to our citizens.
Great.
So thank you very much for being on our call, on our meeting this evening. Thank you. All right, we are on to our next item, which is the public comment section. As of this evening at 5:30, we had received no email notices from our public. However, we have 2 phone callers on our meeting this evening that are unidentified, so I'm assuming they're here for public comment. The first one is the last 4 digits, 8125. If you can hit *6 and introduce yourself, we'd appreciate it. Hello? It looks like we lost that person. 8125, are you still on the line? No. Okay, our next unidentified caller is last four digits of 8996, *6, and you can join us under public comment. Hello?
Hi, I was just listening tonight.
Okay.
So, no comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so officially this evening, our public comment section is closed. We had no public comment. And our next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. I'm going to call for a motion to approve the amended agenda based on our earlier conversation on corrections to our meeting minutes. Can I get a motion for the approved consent agenda?
Mayor Bellisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move approval for the consent agenda with the correction as noted in the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to the motions as presented? Okay, not seeing any, the motion carries. The consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I must say I erred earlier when I said we didn't have any council consideration on our agenda this evening. We do. We are doing a consideration for the South Sound Housing Affordability Partnership. We had discussed this in our March meeting when we were discussing our homeless situation, and the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners did a presentation on what the objectives of this organization is. Our action tonight is to make a decision if we as a council want to participate in the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners as an active agency, yes or no. And part of the information that we received was the draft of what they perceived the agreement is going to be. So I understand that Matt Kaiser is going to review the draft agreement, and then we can have public comment and consideration then. So Mr. Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Matt Kaiser, City Attorney. When you made that comment earlier, I thought I was off the hook for the night. But alas, no such luck. The mayor stole most of my remarks as it related to this. Just to provide a brief recap for council, this matter was previously discussed by council on 2 prior occasions. You had a full presentation at your March 1st meeting together with discussion at the following meeting on the 15th. The issue before the court, or not the court, before the council, it's one of those nights, before the council tonight is essentially the other would-be partners of the affordability partnership is looking to take stock. Who's in, who's out. The decision before you tonight is not the actual execution of the agreement itself. It's simply saying on the part of University Place City Council, are you in? Is this something that you're interested in taking the next step in the development on or not? Has the final pieces started to be put in place with respect to the proposed intergovernmental agreement? To briefly recap the high points, I think as you heard from the earlier presentation, this has been referred to as the coalition of the willing. However, there are certainly some strings attached. The first one up is financial. There has been identified an operational component of this. The initial projected amount is in the ballpark of about $11,000 annually. That's to cover the various FTE staffing. That amount is potentially subject to change depending on how many other jurisdictions are willing to go on board with this. There's also reference throughout the draft IGA for other optional contributions depending on which jurisdictions want to start funding which programs. Also up in the agreement, other high points of the agreement include that if the agreement were ultimately executed, the initial term of the agreement runs through 2023. If council at some point wanted to pull the cord and say, we're not interested in that, there is a deadline by which to do so of June 30th, 2022. And then thereafter, it's on a traditional 6-month expiration term under the draft. Other principles espoused in the agreement do reflect that each jurisdiction gets 1 vote. It does not appear to be a weighed vote. Larger jurisdictions having more votes, smaller jurisdictions having fewer votes, etc. And there is a reference in there that each jurisdiction must otherwise approve the operating budget, except for the initial terms through 2023, which are part of the initial agreement itself, has attachments. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that council may have.
Okay, before we go to council comments, because we always seem to get into consideration during that discussion, I'm going to note that this is under for public comment. As of 5:30 this evening, no one had indicated that they were going to be commenting on it, nor do we have any individuals on our call this evening or on our meeting this evening speaking in favor of it. So I'm going to close the public comment section and go under council consideration. And before we go into consideration and comments, do I have a motion, please?
Mayor Bellisi, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and yes, I move for the approval of the South Sound Affordability Partners interlocal agreement.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilman Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. So now we are under council consideration. Council Member McCluskey, you had your hand raised, followed by Council Member Fleming.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple points of clarification, Mr. Kaiser, to the what is before us for consideration. It is my understanding that there's no money exchanged until after the formalization of the IGA agreement. So we can meet at the table and create and then decide if we're a player or not, because that comes back to council, I would presume.
That's correct. This is the first of 2 touches. If I can make a parenthetical just real quick, the motion that was made before council is approval of the IGA. The motion that's in the materials in the packet and the resolution is expressing our intent.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. That's what I wanted to be clear on, because I'm in favor of that. And also the who will represent University Place at the table with the initial formalization of the IGA.
Are you, Councilmember McCluskey, are you referring to negotiating the final agreement, or in terms of who is University Place's voice at the table should the agreement be reached?
It's kind of the same.
Well,
who's at the table will be our voice, right?
Well, I'll tell you. Okay. I'll tell you why I asked the question. Okay. If you look at the draft IGA, it specifically calls out that the city's representative would be either an elected official or a chief administrative officer. It's written broadly such that in our case, it would be the city manager. That still remains a decision for the council if we were to onboard with this agreement. Okay. If there are changes to the agreement itself, that is something depending on what the nature of the change is. You know, who channels those changes back. I can tell you, I've looked at the agreement for the most part, with the exception of some nitpick procedural issues. I'm not seeing anything there, but if there's something that council says, hey, wait a second, I don't like paragraph, whatever it is, let's have a conversation about that. That's something we would certainly like to know so we can take back and figure out who's the messenger on that piece.
Okay, and so if we go with this one, then the discussion will come back to council as to who's to go to the table for our voice. Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on to Council Member Fleming, our noted end time was 7:45 this evening, so I will need to ask for a motion to extend. And given that we still have this discussion remaining and city manager and council reports, I'm going to ask for an extension till 8:30. Do I have a motion, please?
Yes, Mayor Bellisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move that we extend this evening's meeting until 8:30 tonight.
Okay, do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any council members that object? Okay, not seeing any, the motion carries. We are going till 8:30 this evening. Councilmember Fleming, you were the next individual, followed by Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad we did extend, although I'm normally not in favor of extension. This is a pretty important decision, I think, for the council tonight. But as a procedural matter, I just want to ask before I start, is this where we can make comments on the motion, or is this just simply questions for the city attorney?
Both.
Okay. Well, I've got 2 hours of comments here, right in this button.
No, it's 8:30.
I will not yield the floor. It's kind of like a filibuster time. No, not really. At a blush, when I first heard about this program, I had some doubts, and I thought, well, maybe there's some value here. And at a blush, it really does sound good. And because it does appear to be collaborative, it appears to be a measure by which we're trying to pull the jurisdictions of our region together and really do something good when it comes to affordable housing. I think the thing that I struggle with immensely is defining affordable housing. And, there's the federal definition and there's the definitions that's defined by every jurisdiction in and of itself. So, there's no consensus on what that means, for one. I also, and I don't think I've missed a council meeting when we've talked about this matter, but I thought we were supposed to get even more additional information, as well as even possibly talk about this at the retreat before we actually made a commitment. So I'm somewhat kind of, and if I miss that one, that's a shame on myself. But the things when I looked at this proposal, and again, having looked at it from the city perspective and looking at it from the county perspective, I tend to be, as most of you know, very selfish when it comes to our city and doing what's going to benefit our community versus what's going to benefit others first. And then at the end, how is that going to benefit the regional area overall? Matt, you didn't mention this, but, in the initial presentation, there was a comment, because the devil's always in the details, that there's an executive committee as a part of this board, and they are the ultimate decision makers, regardless of how many votes we have at the table. That executive committee makes all the decisions pertaining to this particular program, and that consists of 2 jurisdictions, the county and the city of Tacoma. So I'm presuming, as I look over this, that at the end of the day, the remainder of the jurisdictions are really advisory in their votes and in their participation on this. So, that I have a concern because, at the end of the day, when we vote on this, and if we choose to do it, we're going to enjoin the city in a program that really, I hate to say it, but doesn't really benefit the city. It may benefit the global jurisdictions, but I don't see where our citizens are going to get any bang for the buck. It does come with, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, but there will be some unmentioned currently, but some unfunded mandates down the road. This $11,000 contribution seems negligible, but again, that number is a swag, and that can change, most likely will change as we go into. So there's other costs that will be incurred on this that we don't know about. So we're making a commitment with a wish and a prayer that the city is going to benefit in one form or a fashion out of it. I wish we had more details on this program and more specifics in terms of, does the city really get to have a participation, and is there going to be something coming back out of this coalition that'll benefit not just the larger jurisdictions, but the smaller jurisdictions as well? And I don't see that when I looked at this particular program. So I'm just going to be very candid and honest, because at the end of the day, when we get into other conversations about, again, raising taxes and fees on the citizens, how we're going to come back and justify how we jumped into a program spent money, but didn't really know what we were buying at the end of the day. So conceptually, I love it because it really starts to get to the root of it. I would love to maybe take a pass right now and then see where it's going to go before final decisions are made. And if it really is what we think it is conceptually, then get on board with it and support it. But right now, we're being asked to make a decision in a void of information. And as a council member, I just feel a little bit uneasy about that. So that's kind of where I'm at for what it's worth. But thank you, Madam Mayor.
Before I go to Councilmember Keel, I'd like to address some of your comments and concerns. Sure. This is an infancy collaborative, but it's not totally infant. They've been meeting for the past 2+ years, driven by the county council and by the city of Tacoma. Those two jurisdictions are currently making plans and regulations that are going to impact all jurisdictions in Pierce County. And with us not being at the table, so to speak, we have no voice into those actions that are being taken. This is our opportunity to help guide the decision making that is done, or at least inform our staff and our citizens of what actions are being taken. The draft that you have is strictly a draft that will not be finalized until all jurisdictions that want to come on board come to an agreement on that. So we still have some opportunity to make changes and have an impact in what's being addressed. This is not a final document. We will have an opportunity as council to review it, but if we're not at the table, the decision making is going to be done by others, and we will be in the minority as a city. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just telling you that this has been going on for 2+ years, that this coalition has been meeting, and they're now wanting to be a little bit more formal so that they can work collaboratively in looking at what affordable housing is and what it means to each jurisdiction. And again, that is a difficult definition to have, because everybody has their own definition. But if we're not at the table, we will still be in the decisions that are made, and will need to be involved in it, because it's not only coming from the county, it's coming from the state and federal level also. So, Councilmember Keel. You are muted, sir.
I know, I'm trying to, it was 2 buttons, the hand raise and then the mute. It was a little bit too much for me. I just want to say that I agree with, typically I always agree with Councilmember Fleming, at least most of what he says. There's with some little differences, but this time I agree with everything he said, about all of that. And I share the concern that he's raised. And so I'm hopeful that, and so my thinking now is to maybe move forward with this conversation, and as long as what we're doing doesn't commit us, and it sounds like it's not, Matt, going to commit us if we decide, but what it does do is that it allows us to get to the document, right, to where now we can sit to the table and then negotiate. And I think at that point in time, if we don't have everything that we think we need to have in the document that we signed, then we back away from the table, then we back away from this then. But the questions that Councilmember Fleming has raised and the concerns, I share them. And if we decide to take the next step, then I think we need to take those concerns in that negotiation, right? And make sure that we can alleviate the concerns that we have in the agreement document, right? So that they're laid out, and now we know what we have. So that's one thing. The other question I had, Matt, is the work that they do. And I was the one that represented us the first year it was started, right? And I went to I think I missed maybe 1 or 2 meetings, but I went to all the meetings. And so when you're sitting at the table, it is very collaborative, and everyone's in and we're talking, and it, you just get so jazzed up because it's like one big team. But the devil's in the details, right? So we got to do that document. But the question that I'm asking is there other work aside from the affordable housing piece, right? And I get that, and it's how you define it, and I'm thinking about building houses and all that kind of stuff and making things affordable. But we just had 2 presentations tonight by the fire department and also by this other group. And in my mind, that is along the spectrum of affordable housing, for lack of a better term, but homelessness and all that kind of stuff like that. And so my question is SHAPE doing those kinds of things as well, or are they not? And if they aren't or are, I mean, just putting those 2 pieces together, I'm wondering how we as a city need to cobble all that stuff together.
Yeah, I think it's easy to pigeonhole some of this just by using the phrase affordable housing and putting it in that umbrella. And that gets exactly to the concerns that Councilmember Fleming is talking about in terms of pick a jurisdiction and they're going to have their own definition. Part of this agreement refers to the idea also of accessible housing. And it's interesting because I went through the agreement earlier tonight before the council meeting, actually with a very similar question what Councilmember Fleming had in hand. Do they purport to tie in anything to that label of affordable housing anywhere in the agreement? Saying, hey, we're going to set an X% of AMI or something like that. And I didn't see it in there. Because I had a very similar question as I was doing final scrubs on this tonight in advance of the meeting. So where I think it has the possibilities, continuing with sort of the collaborative process that you talked about with your involvement over the two years or thereabouts, that you're involved with this, is it's largely what the organization chooses to make of it and what the organization chooses to bring to the table. So if the issues, for example, that Path brought forward tonight, that there's this unserved need of transitional housing out there in the community, just to pick an example, is one that we as Pierce County or in University Place think is worthy of exploration. That's an area where I see the agreement as providing a platform for that discussion, just to identify an example.
Okay. And then where, like the fire department, they're stepping in doing some of this stuff too. I mean, some of the stuff we're already paying for, and that's, and some you don't pay, the county's paying for. So I'm just, it's just too broad right now for me to get my head around. And I think having that conversation around the contract I hope is going to help shape some of this stuff.
No pun intended. But part of the question though too is where is that conversation? Because the proposed IGA provides a platform to that conversation. Do you want that conversation before you enter it into it or after you've entered into it, recognizing there's been a fair amount of work already? And at some point, folks have to say, all right, are we actually going to sign our city's name to this document? But that's a decision for the 7 of you. So.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey, you've already spoken once. I'm going to go to Councilmember Figueroa and then come back to you. Okay. Councilmember Figueroa.
Thank you, Mayor Melisi. So just to make sure this is, I have this all straightened out. The vote tonight is to just say that we want to be at the table to have to finalize the document. That's it. There's no monies expected from us. Correct?
At this stage, that's correct.
And so when the document is completed, then it comes back to us to vote as a council to agree to be included in that agreement, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And at that point, we can say yay or nay, correct?
That's also correct.
Okay. So just help me out a little bit here. I don't understand why we would have to do a council vote to have our city manager participate in discussions, or our mayor to participate in discussions on how an agreement can come back to us. That's done a lot of times, and we've never gone to council to say, yes, we'll send a representative. In this case, it should be the city manager. And so I'm really dumbfounded by the push, and I call it a heavy push, to have this council vote to have a representative there, because I just don't understand. I mean, that is just mind-boggling to me, that the county in Tacoma, I'm not hearing it from other cities, are saying you can't be part of discussing the documents that are going to come before you to vote on, to agree. You can't be at that table unless you vote on it to be at the table. It's just, help me out there, because that seems to be very heavy-handed, and we haven't even started yet.
But I don't know,
think about the future, as Dan Fleming said. And I said this in excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but in previous discussions, I did testify and commented that I'm really troubled by the fact that, to think that one person, that we're going to pay for all this money, is going to pay for one person to take care of the whole county and all the different bosses to handle housing. I know what they're going to be, and I said this already before to you guys. Whoever pays the biggest amount is going to get the attention of that executive director. And all of a sudden, there's going to be more needs and more needs and more needs, and the fees are going to go up, and there's no ending to it, for another bureaucracy that I think that is just another layer. We already have so many housing advocates and so many different shades and levels and tiers. It's not even funny. If you really break it down, you can count, over a dozen housing advocates for affordable housing. So, and a lot of that we do pay in one form or another. Our citizens pay for it. When I say we. So I'm having a really hard time with this whole thing. But getting back, Matt, on this, is why in the world do we need to vote to send the city manager to just be at the table to ensure that that he represents the council for a document that's going to come back to us for a vote?
And Mayor, I don't know if you want to fill this one or if I should.
Go ahead.
All right. Here's the thing. This agreement is, it's approaching the final stages of this agreement, with hopefully a final execution later this summer. If, as you suggest, city manager, designee, or myself is at the table and we're in the room negotiating this agreement, whoever is doing that final part on the part of the city needs to make sure that we have the authority of the city behind us. Because if we don't have that, we have no business being in that room negotiating an agreement that will not secure council approval.
Okay, I buy that.
Okay.
Well, let's just make sure. And I agree with Councilmember Fleming and Councilmember Kill that and is any pressure coming back in the document that we've already voted to be part of this partnership. We didn't vote to be part of a partnership because there isn't any. We don't have an agreement. We're just sending, my understanding is, to be very clear, this vote is to send a representative at the table to help with finalizing that document for us to look at. That's what you were shaking your head yes to. So we are not committed to a partnership any way, sense, or form at this point, correct?
You're not committed, but if we're there and we're saying the city of University Place is having this conversation, there will be an expectation this agreement will have our name on that final version. Yeah, coming back to us for a final round of approval.
Yeah.
I still am very uncomfortable with your but.
There is a formal coalition that is forming from this document. And the expectation or the understanding is that if we participate in the formulation of it, that we are going to participate in the coalition also.
That's my problem I'm having, is expectation. There should be no expectation because this vote is not to give any expectation. The vote is only to send a representative to make sure that we're covered. This vote should not be for an expectation on something that we aren't, we don't have a document in front of us. I'm just commenting.
Council,
you don't have an answer for me.
Member Keel, did you have some clarification to help Council Member Figueroa?
I think so. And not to get in front of, because we're on the topic, I think, Councilman Figueroa, what I'm understanding, and I'm where you are, right? And what's helping me is that my expectation is that whoever represents us at the table, negotiating a document, that representative has to have all of the things that make all 7 of us nervous and make sure that those things aren't in the document, right? And they need to come back up with a document that has things in it that we all 7 of us can agree. And when they bring that back to us, we'll read that document and we'll make sure that we all agree. And if we don't, we can, majority can vote not to be a part of it, and then we walk away from it. But I think what we're trying to do at this point in time, as I'm understanding it, is have somebody deputized to be able to speak for the city on the topics that we want and the things that we want in the document.
Then we should be talking about the things we want in the document. Otherwise, that person doesn't know. So, for example, is capping the amount that we would be participating, because we don't know how many jurisdictions are going to be in, and that fee can go in, number one. Number two, all of a sudden the director says, I can't fulfill everybody's needs, and I need more staffing, I need more money. So there needs to be caps, okay? Number one. Number two, there should be, the executive board cannot make any decisions on all the members without the vote of all the members agreeing to the recommendation. It should be a recommendation coming from the executive board. So I guess what I'm saying is we should be talking about what the heck we want in this agreement that will make us happy to send our representative with those thoughts. That's what we should be talking about. And I'm not hearing that.
Council Member McCluskey, you definitely are sitting on pins and needles here. Go ahead. And then I'll let Council Member Pro Tem lead on the first round.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Council Member Pro Tem Lee, for graciously allowing me to speak before you. I think there's some misconceptions kind of with what we're doing. And one, I think my understanding, and Matt Kaiser can clarify, is the executive board. I thought everyone was at the table. Everyone had the vote. And now Councilmember Fleming is going, no. So, and so it says membership of SHAPE will be governed by an executive board comprised of individuals who have the authority to make decisions on the board on behalf of their governments, which tells me it has to be an elected official from our city, because our city manager may have the knowledge and the expertise, but they don't have the authority, which is conflicting. So we need to have that representative also be thoroughly informed by our staff to have a seat at the table in order to make a decision on behalf of the council. And there's other little nuances because the mayor can't always work on behalf of the council without council approval. So there could be some back and forth and delays of that. And so that is how I'm seeing that the board is going to function as it is written in this agreement, which could be tweaked because it's not official yet. So I want to ensure that it's all members, cities, towns, members will be there, including tribal council chair and members of the county executive, and that we don't have another PCRC formation where it's the county and city of Tacoma driving the mission down the municipalities in cities and towns, and that it is a volunteer participation at the end of the day, either way. But so that's my comment. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Yes, Matt, I have one question. If we should approve this tonight, does that give the county authority to affix our logo to that letter that Mr. Damier had? If so, what signal, what message does that send to the other people that are looking at either affixing their logo to it or already have their logo on it?
I think it says, I mean, first of all, if I were the county and I saw the resolution come through, assuming council passes it, I would be affixing the City of the University Places logo to it.
He seemed very, that he wanted that logo on there. So I'm just wondering what signal we're sending, especially since it appears that there are some questions as to where we're going with this. So, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, but kind of going back to that point and going back to Councilmember McCluskey's point a moment ago on the executive board, I was trying to find the specific references in the agreement that I think might have addressed a couple of the concerns that had been raised primarily by Councilmember Figueroa and certainly to an extent by Councilmembers Fleming and Keel. The executive board membership is identified in paragraph 5A. For those of you playing the home version, it's on page 29 of your council packet. Or at page 8 of the agreement, which does reflect that it is an executive board, which for cities and towns, members will either be the mayor or as designated by the mayor, council members, or a city manager / administrator, with each party having one vote on the executive board. With respect to the budgetary issues, if you take a look at paragraph 13A, exciting paragraph 13A, that appears on page 15 of the agreement or page 36 of the council packet. With no recommended budget becoming effective until approved by the legislative body of each party and adopted by the executive board, except for the full fruit term, that's the 21, 22, and 23 budgets. Once they have approved the contributions either separately or through the budget process and it's been adopted, and then those other provisions come into play. So I would think that may address the concerns, particularly voiced by Councilmember Figueroa. Where do you put in the various caps in there? You still got to run it through the legislative process of all the members who are appearing on the logo, signatories, etc.
Good luck.
You know, we do that. You know, I'm drawing a blank on the agreement. There's a particular agreement every year that comes through that we say, yeah, and I'm just drawing a blank on which one that is.
We do that for PCRC participation.
Yeah.
You know, the board determines what the dues are. You guys don't ever, you approve it when you approve the budget. You approve the dues for that.
Do we have a choice?
It's the same with the AWC membership.
That's my point.
The board,
you know,
the board levies the board levies the rates to be charged to to the various jurisdictions, and we approve it when we approve our budget. Councilmember Fleming, you had some follow-up comments. And just to be aware, we are 8:15, so we still have 15 minutes remaining on our meeting, or we'll have to have another extension.
No worries. I'll take 14 minutes and 59 seconds here. You know, what I love about dialogue and debate and comments is that you always get something good that comes out of it all. But, you know, with this particular conversation we're having, it really is extremely important that we pay attention to the words and what those words mean or what they imply. You know, I think it was Councilmember Figueroa or Councilmember Keel's comments. You know, if we want to just simply have participation without commitment, quite candidly, that would just take consensus of the council to say, yep, let's send the mayor or let's send the city manager, and there's no commitment to do that. There's no commitment, or we're not committing the city to something in the future to say we just want someone there at the table. When we start getting into resolutions, you know, a resolution really starts the role of a commitment, which then creates the expectation. So, you know, we should not allow ourselves to be lulled into this belief of, well, if we pass this tonight and we don't like it in the end, we can back out. There's a farm term for that, and I won't say it here because we're live on TV, but it starts with horse. This, to Councilmember Figueroa's point and to what Councilmember Keel was commenting earlier, this commits us. Once we go down this road, there's no turning back. Yeah, we will be there at the table to help formulate, but we are in. You know, it's kind of like the pig, you know, who's all in. There's no partial in. You're all in for the ride on this one. You know, the comment about the executive board, and I think Councilmember McCluskey alluded to that. Again, let's be clear. If you have an executive board in which all the members are part of it, you don't have an executive board, you have a committee. You have the committee of the whole. The executive board is a limited number of individuals in which each member of that board has one vote to do that. And so, yeah, we, you know, and we can agree to subject ourselves to it, or we can say no. I mean, that's why you have a council to make that decision. But I am not one who's in favor of having our city committed to something to which we maybe, or may not maybe have input on, but yet we are going to live by the commitment and the expectation of that commitment that we're creating. We flat out do not have enough information to be making that kind of a decision unless somebody's got something telepathic that I just don't know about. We just don't. You know, back to my earlier point, you know, the devil really is in the detail. Conceptually, this is a great idea. I know from what Mayor Bellici has said, a lot of work's gone in before us on this. But here and as a council tonight, as a city, we just don't have the details enough to be jumping into this one because, again, it's not just a let's vote on it and we'll go to the table and we'll have a seat there and we'll participate. No, we're going to go there and have a seat at the table, and then you're going to be committed to whatever that is, because to say at the end of that conversation, you know, we came, we looked, we saw, and now we don't want to participate, ain't going to happen. I can tell you right now, it is not going to happen. So with that, I will close my mouth and be quiet.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Thank you, Mayor Bellici, and thanks for the conversation and the good thoughts here. Everyone is working hard. It's great to be part of. There's, I think, a good deal of debate about what the executive board or executive committee means here. And it uses the term executive board in 5A. And when I read 5A, it looks to me like it is all of the jurisdictions that are part of the interlocal agreement. It is not a subset that has additional powers. But I guess we could ask the drafters what they mean. And with that additional information, see if that helps us. If we were to pass this, I would also ask that we clarify in 5A, bullet 1, that it may not necessarily be the mayor who determines who makes the appointment. For city council cities, it would be the city council as opposed to a strong mayor appointment. And there's undoubtedly some other nuanced changes that we need or want to consider as we look through this if we're at the table negotiating this. Councilmember Fleming mentioned that there was some discussion about us doing some further work on this, and I think we had a pretty broad range of discussion opportunities there, and I know County Executive Dannemeyer had, excuse me, had offered to respond to further questions again, as did Tacoma Mayor as well. So, you know, if we need some clarification, we can get those, I guess, before we vote on this, or we can take it up and down vote and and move this along or put it away, as the case may be. From my perspective, I see some benefit in this. I do think we've raised some very good questions about it, and I would like to get a little further information, essentially, about some of those questions. But I do see benefit in this, and I think it goes well with our housing action plan that we're in the midst of now. And within the next 90 days, Council, I have a report about that, and we'll be choosing certain strategies that plan will suggest. And at the end of the day, this entity, if it gets created and if we choose to be part of it, could really help us on that implementation as we work on those strategies. So I see it fitting in nicely where we are in this continuum of dealing with housing actions. But we have to have confidence. And I have to say, if we have no real intention of joining this thing, we should just not vote for it. If we are open to the discussion and might actually at the end of the day join it, then I'd say yes, we should, we should vote for it then. Any case, I'm going to let it go at that, but thank you for the chance to comment.
Okay. Final comments. Are you having new information to bring to the table, Councilmember Figueroa?
Mayor Belisi, thank you. No new information. My last comment is, again, which has not been thoroughly discussed, I don't believe, and that is there is a lot of housing, affordable housing application, as I've said, that we already pay for. And I don't know how in the world this particular governmental entity is going to do any more that any one of these will already are doing that we have access to as a city, and especially with one person. I just don't see how that can operate and do anything that is worthwhile to make a difference in affordable housing. The major keys are in place is to support, instead of adding another one, let's support what that's already there. Thank you.
Thank you. We are getting close to our 8:30 deadline, so it looks like we'll need to get another extension. So before Councilmember Keel gets into the discussion, can I get a motion to extend to 8:45?
Yes, Mayor Belisi, I would like to extend our meeting. May I motion to extend our meeting to 8:45, please? This is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second Councilmember Keel.
Okay, do I have any objections? Okay, not seeing any. This will be our final comment before we take the up or down vote on participation in SHAP, or in SHAPE rather. Councilmember Keel.
So thank you, Mayor. So I would just maybe offer a modification or amendment to the motion, and that is that we just offer consensus to move forward as opposed to a resolution. And that may get to what Councilmember Fleming raised around we're committed, and the fact that we've got some resolution or something like that versus just consensus, and ask the person to go and do the negotiations there. And hopefully that's something that's going to be acceptable to the other group. And if it isn't, then we walk away then. But I want to offer this modification so it doesn't lock us in, to the horse comment that was made earlier before.
I would support that, Councilmember Keel.
Mr. Kaiser.
Yeah, if you were to embrace that approach, what I might suggest is that you move to table the current action, whether it's indefinitely or to a time certain. You've got the 2 meetings in May. I know that they certainly would like to hear from University Place on a sooner rather than later basis. So we can say there was a robust discussion. There's certainly a willingness on the part of University Place to go forward. However, there are a couple of outstanding questions. And I think that might be the approach if that's where you're trying to go with that.
Yeah. It almost sounds like from the discussion that we will need to invite both Mayor Woodards and the executive back for a study session discussion on this, and hopes to be able to answer some of the questions and concerns that have been raised again this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, final discussion?
Yes, actually, that is a motion to table the primary motion until a future date.
We do have a motion. It wasn't seconded, so that's okay.
Yeah,
So
Councilmember Fleming, I think, seconded.
we
have a motion?
We had a first and a second.
Okay, so my motion was out of order, which is just fine. I was trying to determine if that was already a motion on the table. Thank you.
Does Councilmember Keel and Fleming want to modify their motion?
I do. I withdraw my second to Councilmember Keel's motion, and I will second Councilmember Worthington's motion.
And Councilmember Keel, are you withdrawing yours? Okay. So we have a first and a second to, what was it again?
To table.
To table this discussion.
And
Okay.
that takes precedence over everything else on the table, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, it does indeed. Okay, do I hear any objections? Okay, none. So it passes unanimously. Okay, so at this time, we are on to our final item with our council city manager report. Mr. Sugg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Last week, we were notified that the city's 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report has been awarded a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada. This is the 23rd consecutive year that the award has been earned by the city. Excellence in Financial Reporting is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting. Its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. So I'm quoting some things right from the award. So I wanted to announce this to the public and to the council. This is significant, and we shouldn't take this for granted. It's a lot of work to get there, and it's the great work of Finance Director Leslie Blaisdell and her team in achieving this. So that's my report, Mayor and Council.
All right. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any report? Or
Councilmember Figueroa does not have any reports. Thank you.
okay. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I'm just going based on the screen.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McCluskey.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And I do. First of all, I would like to give kudos to our finance team. Hooray. They've always have done outstanding work. So give the council's congratulations to them and in appreciation of their hard work and diligence and efforts as well. I went to the APCRC meeting last Thursday, and they talked about their buildable lands program, the evaluating the different municipalities that are achieving urban densities with urban growth areas and housing rates consistent with adopted growth targets, which means accountability. We talked about that with our previous discussion. And so they've set, we've all set our goals. We've given it up, to PCRC. PSRC had the blessings, and now it's time to see how we managed ourselves to meet the goals. So in essence, that's what's coming down, that we have to figure out if we met them, and if we didn't meet them, give a documentation as to why we didn't meet them, or if we need our numbers adjusted. And that could have other consequences as well. The second in regards to that is establishing a billable lands program to provide county-wide monitoring and analysis mechanisms to meet these requirements. So it's not just the city going up, but we'll have direct oversight through the county level as well. And then also the discussion was to accommodate Pierce counties and to evaluate Pierce County's ability to accommodate this in the 20-year population and employment needs, and how that is all vetted from the county down to the Pierce County's cities and towns. And they're looking at having this completed, I think, in a year or so. I forgot to write down the timeline, but it is coming up with that accountability. And then then we had a PSRC overview as to what PSRC does and its scopes and duties and regulations to the 4 counties and 82 cities and towns. So that was just a review, and that was pretty much the end of the meeting, end of the day. Nothing other than the significance except for my Zoo Truck Authority report. I gave that, and so I briefed that on you to the council last week as well. So that ends and concludes my report. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. Councilmember Keel, do you have any report outs this evening?
No, Mayor, none that I want to share tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming.
Madam Mayor, I have nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, I don't have anything to report. I assume, Mayor, that you'll be handling our report on a visit in.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Good. Thank you.
All right. Before I get to my report outs, I do want to remind council that we do have a retreat scheduled for Saturday, the 24th, from 8:30 to 3:30 with Michael Pendleton. The agenda will be sent out here this week. So be prepared. And also I will be delivering nice little packages to each of you on Friday evening so that you are well nourished for our meeting. So please be aware that the stranger in your driveway will be me. Okay, so report out on April 9th, the Mayor Pro Tem, City Manager Steve Sugg, and our Deputy City Manager Eric Faison were joined we joined up and met with Congresswoman Strickland, her District Director Liz LADAR and her Chief of Staff, Andrew No. And the purpose of this visit was to start a conversation with a congressman, since infrastructure funding seems to be a priority of our federal government. And we wanted to discuss our Day Island Bridge. So we decided to take her on a site visit and walk the entire length of the bridge, discussing some of the issues that we have with the bridge. And one of the most major issues is that this bridge is classified as structurally deficient. It's got a rating of 30.54 out of 100. And generally anything that is under 40 is considered a high risk for structural failure, and is generally a time at which bridges are replaced. So we wanted to lay the foundation, because this bridge presents a real unique replacement conundrum for staffing, because it's the only access on and off the island for the households that are there, and for getting any sort of safety equipment there. So it's going to take a lot of ingenuity, and it's going to take a lot of design efforts, and it's a long-term project. Currently, just to replace the bridges, we're looking at approximately $25 million. And as we all know, being on council, we don't have that kind of money in our bank account to be able to support that sort of a infrastructure cost. So we do need to look to our outside entities to help partnering. So this is going to be a long-term discussion, hopefully not too long, and that we don't end up with a major earthquake or something that knocks the bridge out. But what we're hoping is that by starting this conversation, we can at least get some funding for the preliminary design and planning of the replacement of this bridge. And that currently is looking to be about $1 million. But some of that planning has to do with what we do as how we replace the bridge. What are we going to do if the bridge comes down? What are some of our options on and off the island to support the residents? So keep your fingers crossed that maybe with this transportation upcoming budget, we can at least be considered for some planning dollars on that, so we can at least have that in our back pocket as we move forward. So it was a real nice, interesting meeting with these key representatives, and it appears that her legislative aide, as well as the Congresswoman, are very much engaged and have maintained contact with staff and have come back with ongoing questions regarding this bridge replacement. So let's hope that we find some success here on it. So that was our major visit with staff, with her staff, and it was a pleasure. It was a good day. It wasn't too windy and cold that day, so it was nice to get out and socially distance with those individuals. So that's all my report at this point. We will, based on tonight's conversation, look to seeing about getting Executive Bruce Danmeyer and Mayor Woodards from Tacoma to come out for a study session so we can continue this conversation and move this project shape forward for final conclusion. So with that, I have no other items, and I will adjourn our meeting. Good evening.